Here's a video on some colors that I'm going to be studying. And there's all sorts of ways that I like doing swatch studies. Sometimes sort of separate like this, and understanding just when they're separated, it's kind of easier to paint one shape and then let it dry while you're painting a different shape. And when I'm trying to just get a really general overall sense of something, this particular one I was mixing a couple colors, peacock blue and quin burnt orange. Then I might go that way with everything sort of separated. Sometimes I'll do it more like this way, where I'm just doing the idea is just to be doing a value study of whatever colors I'm studying and understanding what a light layer of it will look like, and then subsequent layers built on that. So this is similar to that whole idea, but I felt like not being quite so robotronic, quite so structured, even though it's still going to be fairly structured, because the whole point is I really am trying to learn about the color and the paint without thinking too much about the quote-unquote painting. So, colors I'm working on for this study are Daniel Smith Phthalo Green Blue Shade, this right here is M. Graham Cobalt Teal. This is Grumbacher Phthalo Blue. It's my favorite phthalo blue that is green shade, even though it doesn't have that in the name. And this is it's either Daniel Smith or M. Graham, but it's ultramarine blue. Pretty similar. I will say the M. Graham seems like it doesn't granulate quite as much as some ultramarine blue, so it has me wondering, this is pretty granulated. It might be that I had put the Daniel Smith in there, but that's something that is understandable regardless. And this last one is M. Graham, and this is the dioxazine purple. And lots of brands have dioxazine purple. Daniel Smith calls it carbazole purple. That was probably just louder as I said that. But I find the M. Graham to be just more vibrant after it dries. It doesn't dry nearly as flat, as desaturated as a lot of them that I've tried, including the carbazole. So I've just done just sort of had fun with making a no-nonsense swatch, kind of inconsistent, and I'm just gonna still kind of do my my study of subsequent layers, and I will begin now. So I'm just gonna kick in with the phthalo green blue shade, and what I would call this first layer is really watery. I think I can scooch over here so that you can see the actual color I'm grabbing. But I would call this one that I'm going to do, probably more just straight watery. I'm pretty familiar with how dark these colors will go. This would likely be fine, but just as a demonstration, I might want it a little bit lighter. In general, I definitely like to start light, like most watercolor artists do. But if you see what I did there, the color that I had introduced to the shape that I'm painting seemed like it might have been a little bit darker than I wanted it to be. So I just grabbed some water from my water bucket and brought that straight into the shape that I'm painting. And so it just diluted it a little bit. That is sort of, it can be very helpful to have a piece of scratch paper, an old piece of watercolor paper of a watercolor that didn't quite work, just to test your colors on it first. But I do find that it's fairly easy to kind of just adjust things as I'm painting like that. It was a little too dark, and so I added a little bit of water. Anyways, this next one is cobalt teal. Got a weird thing going on in there. And this is the M. Graham. I have this one in, oh, I just have the paint in various places right now. Using a nice big, so this is the 300-pound Arches bright white cold press watercolor paper. And this is a nice Kolinsky Sable brush from Daniel Smith. That holds quite a bit of paint and water and makes it easy to create these washes. Pretty consistently and quickly without too many times going back to the well. So that's kind of fun and not necessarily perfect, but that's okay. I'm going to go back to my plate here for my next one. This is Grumbacher Phthalo Blue. I have that here. I have a feeling that's going to be a little too strong. Let's see. Yeah, that's darker than I sort of want it for this particular layer. So once again, just kind of coming in, adding some water to that mixture. Diluted it. I could, I'm bringing in even more water. So just painting with, instead of adding more blue, just adding water to my brush. yeah, I'll lose a little bit of paint in the that process. If it's too dark, and you might be able to see it in the... But even with, especially phthalo blue, I find, which is one of my favorite colors, but, oops, but needs a, can stain relatively quickly. A lot of times I try to describe kind of what I do is I'm not so much kind of painting right now as that I'm trying to create a shape here that's contained by the borders of where I'm putting the water, and within that shape I'm trying to put a bunch of water that happens to have color. And because it's nice watercolor paper, well, pretty much any watercolor paper, it'll stop wherever I leave the paper dry. Eventually it'll pool up so much that it will spill over, but that takes a lot. So I'm going to use my thirsty brush approach here. I'll tip it so the color is just sort of pulling towards the lower right. I could also just run it along the bottom like that. There is definitely a little stain there where, so that might be an argument for, if you want to start lighter, use a test piece of paper. But I'll probably come back over that anyways, and I am fairly confident that it will never be known. Let me see. I'm going to go over here to my ultramarine blue. Try to mix a big watery pool, puddle. It is helpful to tip. If you see some of my other videos, a lot of them I'm doing demonstrations of swatches more along the size of that, but the idea is the same in that I'm just trying to wet the whole shape. I started off with a blob, usually in the upper left corner, and depending on how big of a brush I'm using, I'll go get some more paint, or how big of a shape I'm trying to paint. And then just keep overlapping that the row of pooling color. Speaking of pooling color, I see there's plenty going on here. So there's a fun bent thirsty brush, but I am going to suck that up, sponge that up, as well as that. I think it's still dry enough to be sponging up. thirsty enough. Yeah, it is. I just grabbed a little color over here and brought it over here. And finally, I'll do the dioxazine purple. And I know that somebody said they don't have purple, and it seemed as if one of my students was potentially not going to purchase a purple. But that is certainly your choice, and my favorite mix for purples and violets is Daniel Smith Quinacridone Pink, and then an ultramarine blue. That's the one that I find works the best for me. But let's see. I will do one more pass here on, not one more, my next pass on the purple layer. I do want to learn from my experience and not run into that again of staining the paper. Once again, this is just a little old study, so not critical, but always good to learn. That is my words of wisdom for the evening. It's good to learn. Like I think I said in class and a lot of other videos, sometimes I'll just sort of bring in a bunch more wet color up at the top so that I know I have plenty that's going to keep running down and make this that right there. Because if I overlap that, I don't have to press nearly as hard. It's just like and in fact, you could certainly move this color literally without touching the paper. But I use minimal pressure, and it's easy to move the paint around. When there's a big puddle of it available right there. That description may make sense, or it may not. Either way, yeah, it's fun. I'm going to let that dry and do some more.